G'day folks, Steve here. I just thought you might like to have a bit of a look behind the scenes at why it takes so long for me to put chapters out at about one every 2 weeks. This one here, what we've got at the moment is the master file of Chapter 9 of Alice in Wonderland. Mostly unedited. We can see all of this blank stuff is unedited. That's just raw, spewed out from my recordings. Last night I recorded this one. And all those little blue lines represent individual edits where I've changed the timing between lines or pasted in different characters. Because Alice in Wonderland has more or less a full cast, I'm only playing a couple of sort of small roles. Mostly I'm just the narrator. There's a lot of cutting and pasting of various characters. Let's see what we've got if we play just here. I'm not sure what this is. I should have lined up something first. All anxious to have the experiment tried.
Very true,
said the Duchess.
Flamingos and mustard both bite. And the moral of that is, birds of a feather flock together.
Only mustard isn't a bird. Yeah, so there we go. We're pasting in the Duchess there, having a little conversation with Alice just before she leaves this scene. I think if we go up ahead...
Now, I give you fair...
Ah, here we go.
A fine...
Yes, all right, excellent. This is a good spot, because this has 3 characters. We can see here I've got the Duchess, Chapter 9, Master, WAV file. This was the full recording that Alison Sharper did with me just for this chapter. That was 20 minutes of recording for, as we can see, is, maybe 10 lines or something like that. So it takes a long time to record, then it takes a long time to edit it and choose, which lines we're actually going to use, and then put them into the cleaned up master file. So that's part of the reason that it takes so long. With her arms folded, frowning like a thunderstorm.
A fine day, Your Majesty.
The Duchess began in a low, weak voice.
Now, I give you fair warning,
shouted the Queen, stamping on the ground as she spoke.
Either you or your head must be off.
So there you go. We've got 3 separate characters there. We've got the Duchess from this file here, and the narrator that's part of the original file here, the unedited version of my reading of the chapter. And then the Queen's file over here, that's the only bit that we've actually copied with, but you can see there's a few more lines going on here. Much shorter recording session. The Queen Chapter 9 is only, a little under 3 minutes for the whole session. And there are chapters like that, definitely, but there's also chapters, if we have a look in, like, Tim's Things, from 1984, there was a 20-minute recording. There'll be a bunch of other ones. There we go, another 20-minute. O'Brien Last Master, 9 minutes on that one. But there's a whole bunch of them. There's hours and hours and hours and hours and hours and hours and hours of recordings from both of the books that I'm working on at the moment. There you go, all the different actors in Alice in Wonderland. And we'll do a little bit of actual editing. So I'll edit a line or two for you and you can see what I actually do. However, the moment they saw her, they hurried back to the game. The Queen merely remarked. Right, so there we go. We've got the first part of the line there. Then we've got a little pause, which we're going to highlight. And I hit Control-T, which inserts a silence there. Because I'm not recording in a studio, I'm recording just in my front room late at night or downstairs in the sort of basement bedroom if I have to record during the day, to try and get away from traffic noise and whatnot. But it's not a soundproof studio, so there's a lot of background noise. So I have to blank out the gaps between every single line. Every line you can see there. Then we fade out a bit so it's not a hard cut out and it sounds all right. They hurried back to the game. Yep, that sounds all right. And then we'll check the timing between these 2 bits. Even though this is a flubbed line and the correct line is actually over here, we can still set up the timing using this one, and I don't like to change it until I absolutely have to. The moment they saw her, they hurried back to the game. The Queen merely remarked. All right, I think the timing is pretty good for that one. So we'll take the flubbed line there, we'll delete it and bring up the correct line. Just make sure it's not that one. All the time they were... Nope, that goes on. When they saw her, they hurried back to the game. The Queen merely remarking that a moment's delay... Ah, actually, that was just a comma, isn't it? Saw her, they hurried back to the game. The Queen merely remarking, right? That's a continuation, so it's just a comma, so that break will actually be much smaller than that. However, the moment they saw her, they hurried back to the game. The Queen merely remarking that a moment's delay would cost them their lives. There we go. So that's that line, and then we'd look on to moving to the next one. Generally, like, it depends on the pace of the text as well. In 1984, which we've got over here to show you the next section, generally the spaces between lines are a minute long because that's a very slow-paced book. Alice in Wonderland is a children's sort of fictional fantastic story, so the gaps tend to be a lot smaller when I do them. Generally about half a second, unless it's a break between scenes, and then we'd push it up to a second. Would cost them their lives. All the time they were playing, the Queen never left off quarrelling with the other players. Yeah, so there you go. I'll carry on with that myself later. So over to Camtasia. This is so that I can show you the sound effects and music work that goes in. This is from chapter 17, the last one to just go up on Patreon this morning. Actually, while I'm recording this, we can see that's a huge one at 49 minutes over here. Bloody enormous, absolutely very, very long chapter, but also did not involve a lot of sounds, because for a lot of this, I think for the first third or so, he's sort of doing interesting things, interacting with the world. But we can see just basically once you see that gas stove kick in, that's sort of the start of him reading a book. He's just sitting in a chair and reading a book. No action is going on. But I'll show you what I've done about that later. So we'll just play the start of this, and you can see how that's all set up. There's the wonderful Jet Girls theme music there that plays first, of course. Part 2, Chapter 9. There you go, already. Before the words actually start, I like to set the scene. So we have the city come up, and we have the footsteps of Winston walking along come up. And then we start in the reading, and we can see he's walking along and, self-narrating or whatever's going on there for quite a while. That's 2.5 minutes or so. But then some interesting stuff comes in. Now this, I'm actually really quite pleased with this scene here. It probably just looks like a bit of a muddle to you. But this is a political rally. Spoilers, by the way. If you haven't gotten up to Chapter 17, if you're not on Patreon or whatever, you might not want to listen to this little bit because there will be some spoilers involved. But it is a political rally where a bunch of people have come together during Hate Week that, the first 2/3 of the book have been sort of leading up to. We are now into Hate Week, and we're listening to the speeches, and there's the crowds and the just all over the place. And I had to try and emote that audibly without actually having access to a large crowd of people to record. And you don't always get exactly what you want. There are, bear in mind, I'm a one-man sort of home business. I don't have a lot of funds at all. I get $85 a month from Patreon to help me get some software and stuff like that, and a little bit from YouTube, ever diminishing, might I add. But I don't have a lot of money to buy sound effects, and sound effects are really expensive. Really, really expensive. It's a seller's market. You go out there and you find like a bunch of... you can get packs for like $1,700, because they're aimed mostly at TV and film people. So, yeah, basically I have to muddle about as best I can getting free sound effects or sound effects I can make myself. And this bit here I'm particularly proud of. In fact, I'm just going to shut off the actual story track to try and avoid spoilers, so you're just going to get the scene. So let's have a listen to what's going on here. It's just Winston walking, scene change. A bit of a crowd. Helicopter in the background. Some marching troops. because it is a military rally. Crowd applauding the troops. They like this stuff. They're all on the same side. We're going to hear up here, this is actually one of Hitler's speeches, which of course has the perfect, military rally sound. But so as not to twofold, so I wouldn't offend any people, and also so that it wouldn't actually interfere with the sound of the story being read. I've kept it nice and quiet in the background, and it's also playing backwards. So in German, playing backwards, it's not going to show up as speech on your brain centers. It's all going to be nice and clear for the Red Book. But we'll go another helicopter, some more crowd sounds. There we go. A little bit of a calm spot, but bursts of applause as we go through. And then things get a little wild. We've got the riot coming up. And again, another one over here. A few different crowd sounds taken from all over the place. I get a lot of people actually asking where I get my sound effects from, and in general, I've either sourced them on YouTube or from some other free website. There's plenty of good ones around the place, or I do make them myself. And some of these, I swear, are just from people in Europe going out to a soccer stadium and recording the audience. It sounds about that nutty. But yeah, that all took a very long time. That was like a day's work just making all of that. And let's see what happens next. Okay, then he goes back to the office for some work there. Just little things. Sitting down in his chair. The pneumatic tube delivering more work for him. We go this. That sound effect, that vocoder sound effect, man, I'm proud of that. That took me like half a day of work to build that. That's the sound of a oscillating fan slowed down. It's a 1980s dot matrix printer and an old keyboard, and also the buttons on the remote control to my air conditioner. That's all put together to make this wonderful sound, which I have to admit I was sort of channeling the part of Blade Runner where he's checking out the photo via the computer and saying, enhance on this sector, blah blah, go down to the, that's, yeah, I've always loved the sound of the machine when Harrison's in that scene, so I've sort of let that become the vocoder a little bit, because it is actually just a microphone that you speak into in the book. That's all it is. But you can't very well have, Winston talking while I'm trying to read the story. That's, so we had to come up with a different way of showing that he was working on that. So the last scene, the major part of the scene is Winston reading a book. How exciting can that be? So, hang on, here we go. He comes in from the street. There he is. Hits the stairs. Opens a window. Goes to light his stove. There we go. And then we've got the gas stove burning for the rest of the scene. I figure he uses it a heater. Sits down there, sorry. I figure he uses the gas stove as a heater as well. So that's why it goes like that. Now, all we've got is Winston sitting in a chair for, what was it, 40 minutes? Yeah. Nearly 40 minutes, right? Just reading. So how exciting can that be? You can't just leave the sound bed running for 40 minutes. That's way too long. You have to have some things happening. So I decided occasionally he would be shifting his weight in the chair and we'll get some little creaky sounds. There we go. See, little creaky, and every now and again he would turn the page. I don't have many turning the page sound effects, but you can get an enormous amount of variety in this program in particular by speeding up and slowing down the sound effect. I'll show you what I mean. Here we go, this book turning. All right, fairly calm. Now let's, what have we done? So it sticks it up there for some reason. Let's say we want that same sound effect. Let's just cut it down to the energetic bit so we can hear it a bit better. There we go. Want the same one. He wants to turn 2 pages at once. But we don't want that exactly the same sound effect. That would be ridiculous. So we'll slow this one down to 70% and it'll change the pitch. See? It's just a little bit more interesting for the ears, and I'm always trying to keep your ears interested while reading the book. What do we got? Just some people. People outside the window. See? Not that exciting. Shifts in his chair. Just little things to break up the sound. And yeah, so that's pretty much it, apart from actually showing you a recording session, which I think you'd find very, very dull. This is how long it takes. 5 minutes of editing today has taken 3 hours. Just doing the master file and putting the sounds together. Then I'll take them over into Camtasia, and I will start putting the sound effects and the music on, and also compile the 2 different video versions and the 2 different audio versions for Patreon. And that's it. This is why it takes 2 weeks to put out a chapter, particularly when it's enormous like this. So I hope you've enjoyed seeing a little bit behind the scenes of how I do things and why it takes so long. And yeah, thanks for listening. I'm glad you enjoyed the books. I hope you continue to do so. Okay, bye-bye.